If I asked you to point towards heaven, where would you point? If you had to point in a direction, you'd point up, right? Up in the clouds. If I asked you to point to hell, even if you don't believe in the concept of hell, where would you point? Point down, right? That's sort of the traditional ways. Heaven is up, hell is down, even if we don't take that literally. So if I asked you then to point to where God is, where would you point? What direction? You might point up. I mean, there's a kind of our Father who art in heaven, kind of a direction looking up to God. But I bet if you thought about it for a minute, where is God? You might start to point around. And God is everywhere. Now, God isn't the rocks and the trees. They aren't divine. Somehow we know that God is in us and among all things. How would we find words to describe this sort of complex notion about where God is? So we found a helpful description in that reading from Acts that Kate read this morning. St. Paul, our patron saint, is in Athens, there with a lot of sophisticated people, and Paul is trying to describe about God, and so he gives a quote. Paul says, "In God we live and move and have our being." That's what he says. What is that like? And sort of imagine if God is like the water, we are like the fish. You know, a fish is just surrounded by the water and moves around it. It's everywhere, even kind of inside the fish. We think of the divine in that way. The divine is all around us. So if we were to say, where would you point to God? You kind of point everywhere. In God we live and move and have our being. And there's another place we might point. If we were asked, where is God? Another place that you could point would be at yourself. Inside us, dwelling in our hearts. We might be hesitant to do that. I know I am. When you think of saying, where is God, to point at yourself. Because I am not God. That would be demented. None of us is divine, right? We're not, it's not about that. We also might be hesitant to point at ourselves because I can say, I know how selfish and misguided and prideful I can be. Well, God's going to be inside of this person? I don't know. It'd be a struggle to imagine that. Or maybe even a sense that God feels far away to us. We can have that sense. If the divine doesn't feel close, that's our experience, and how can we say that God is inside of us? There's a man named St. Augustine who lived in the 400s in North Africa, and he wrote a book. There's a story of his life and his struggle to find faith, especially try to find the Christian faith. And one of the things Augustine, this is what he said about his search for God. He said, "God, late have I loved you, but you were within me and I was in the external world and sought you there. Augustine felt like he was sort of looking in the wrong place for God. He looked for God in nature and in books and all around him, and that's great. He found God there, but he said one of the places he neglected to look that was missing for him is that God was within him. He wasn't really looking for God there. Still hard to grasp or believe? It is for me. I'm right with you then. Okay, so let's go to our gospel reading today. One of the words that we hear, especially in John's gospel, is the word abide. To abide means to be there, to reside, to hang out when you abide. Jesus says, the Spirit abides with you and will be in you. In is the word that's used. And then a little later, Jesus says to his followers, I am in my Father, and you in me, and I in you. I am in you, he says. Kind of mystical statement. Pretty amazing. He doesn't say, I'm next to you. Christ says, I will be in you. I will abide in you, within us. The transcendent Creator, the risen Christ, making a home within us, in our hearts, in our souls, the deepest part of ourselves. May be hard to believe, but that's what our scripture says. Again, if we can begin to try to imagine that, to grasp that this is going on, God dwelling within us, it does have implications. Take praying, for example. Sometimes we might think about praying as sending our thoughts and words out to God. We send them out, maybe even out to God in heaven. God, I know that you're busy, but these are things that I'm worried about, or people, and I'm going to send these prayers out to you. And I hope, God, that you can hear these, that you're listening to me. Sort of like putting prayer in the mail, and you're sending it off, and you hope it gets there. That's fine to think of prayer that way. But what if prayer is not only sending prayers out, but seeking God within? The writer and mystic Thomas Merton invites us to descend into the depths of our own spirit. And on this interior journey, we trust, quote, that at the center of our being is where God dwells. Amazing. God is not far away in this. God is not some distant place far away in heaven. But we are to, in our prayer, in our stillness, in our trying to get to know ourselves at our deepest center, there's a holiness of God inside you and me. I mean, this sense that God dwells in us, that would certainly impact how we think of ourselves. I mean, could God be that close as our breath to us? Could we spiritually wake up to that, become more aware of that closeness? That Christ is in me. Hey, it seems too good to be true. Could it be that there's that level of holiness in ourselves, in our hearts, our wills, our spirits, that we might be able to align with and get in touch with? Maybe more important, this can alter even a little bit the way we look at other people. I mean, look to your right. Look to your left. Look at these people right around you. Where is God? Well, would you point to those people? Would you point to a person? You might be hesitant because they're not God, right? We don't want them to get a big head. But we can and do experience God's wisdom, God's love coming to us through other people. It's because God is flowing from them to us. If God's Spirit dwells in human beings, pretty amazing to think, well, this is not just going to be for the saintly, holy people. It's going to be inside everyone. Just part of how we were made. Yes, God might dwell in the person I disagree with, the person I can't stand, in my enemy even. God dwells in them too. Not that they're acting and behaving in godly ways, that's not a given, but there's a sacredness in each human being on this planet, a holiness that's sometimes hard to notice, but needs to be honored with dignity. And it can change the way we treat people a little bit. Where is God? Where are we going to point? Up? Down? All around? In my neighbor? In my enemy? Maybe amazingly, inside me.